Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a subject that, on the surface, feels incredibly heavy, but the starting point is actually this paradox about how, in many ways, we've never had it better.
It's a really disorienting place to start a conversation about global poverty, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, you look at the big picture, the macro trends, and we are, by almost any measure, living in the best time in human history.
Absolutely. We've cured diseases that used to wipe out huge chunks of the population.
Right. Smallpox is just gone. Polio's on the ropes. We have, the sum of all human knowledge right here in our pockets on a smartphone. And if you look at the long arc of history, violence is actually on the decline.
We've cracked the code on so many big, complicated problems.
We have. But then you pick up the source material for today's deep dive, which is Professor Dr. Asad Ali's Poverty to Prosperity, a blueprint for change. And you realize there's this massive, persistent blind spot. It feels like we have all the knowledge, but we can't seem to do the thing that matters most.
And that is the absolute core of the argument. It's what Dr. Ali calls the no-do gap. That's the central tension we're going to be exploring.
No-do gap.
Exactly. We know technically how to solve these problems. We know the science behind clean water. We know how to vaccinate a child. We know the pedagogy to teach a child to read. But we consistently fail to do it, to implement it in the places that need it most.
And the scale of that failure is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. I mean, to put a number on it, the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP, reports that 1.1 billion people are living in what they call multidimensional poverty.
A billion people. And that term is so important, isn't it, multidimensional? Because I think for most of us, when we hear poverty, our brain just goes straight to money.
It does. It goes to an income figure like the World Bank's line of, $2.15 a day?
Right. They don't have enough cash.
And that is such a dangerous oversimplification. It's not just about a lack of money. Multidimensional poverty means you are being deprived on multiple fronts at the same time.
So it's not just one thing.
No, it's a web. It's about a lack of agency, a lack of control over your own life. It's about your health, your family's health. It's about education. It's about, the very floor you stand on in your home. Is it packed earth or is it concrete?
Wow. Even the floor.
Even the floor. And the fuel you cook with, is it clean gas or you and your children breathing in smoke from burning dung and wood inside a tiny unventilated room every single day? When you start to see poverty through that lens, you realize it's a systemic trap designed to keep people in, not just a temporary state of being broke.
To make this less of a statistic, because, how can any of us truly comprehend what 1.1 billion people even looks like? I want to talk about one person. The source material introduces us to a woman named Fatima.
Her story is, unfortunately, emblematic of the entire problem.
She was 28 years old, living in a place called Matiari in Pakistan.
And it's important to note, Matiari isn't some barren desert. It's near the Indus River. It's fertile agricultural land.
It's a place where food grows. And yet, Fatima, a farm worker, was malnourished. She was pregnant, working in the fields, and the tragedy isn't just that she was poor, it's the mechanics of her death.
The cascade of failures.
Exactly, a cascade. She went into labor, had complications. The family did everything right. They got her to a local health facility. But, and this is failure number one, the local facility wasn't equipped. It couldn't handle complications, especially not at night.
No staff, no equipment, no blood bank.
Nothing. So they just turned her away. They said, you need to go to the big city, go to Hyderabad.
Which is a journey. That's not a 5-minute ambulance ride. That's a long, expensive trip for a family that has nothing.
And she died on the way. She bled to death on the road to Hyderabad. And Dr. Ali makes this point that just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
He says Fatima didn't slip through a crack.
Yeah, we love that phrase in the West, don't we?
We do. Oh, the system's good, but a few people fall through the cracks. He says no. She fell through a giant hole, a hole the system itself designed.
And that's what this deep dive is about. We're not just here to tell sad stories. We're here to dissect what Dr. Ali calls the anatomy of poverty. We're going to look at the 5 key players in this system: the poor, the rich, civil society, institutions like religion and politics, and finally, the international organizations.
To really understand why the system is so stuck, why after decades of aid and trillions of dollars, Fatima still ends up on that road.
And then, once we understand the diagnosis, we can look at the solution he proposes, this shift to what he calls a Public-Entrepreneurial Partnership, or the PP model.
Which is all about shifting the role of government from being a provider of services to being a facilitator. But you're right. Before we get to the cure, we have to understand the disease.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the diagnostics. Let's really unpack multidimensional poverty.
Okay, so the MPI, the Multidimensional Poverty Index, think of it less like a bank statement and more like a full-body health scan for a household's quality of life.
Yeah.
It looks at three big dimensions: health, education, and living standards. But inside those, it breaks down into 10 specific indicators. And this is where it gets really granular and really powerful.
So walk us through a few of those, because I think the details are what make it so real.
Sure. So under living standards, for instance, it asks, does the household have electricity? Is there access to safe drinking water within a 30-minute round-trip walk?
30 minutes.
And that's the best-case scenario for inclusion. It also asks, what is the flooring made of? Is it dirt, sand, or dung?
Let's pause on that one. The floor. Why does the material of a floor matter so much that it's a global poverty indicator?
It matters immensely. I mean, think about it from a health perspective. If you have a dirt floor, you can never truly get it clean. It's a prominent reservoir for bacteria, for parasites, for worms.
And you have babies crawling on this floor.
Exactly. Children are playing on it. People are sleeping near it. They are constantly exposed to pathogens that cause chronic diarrhea, that cause stunting. So a simple concrete floor isn't a luxury item. It's a fundamental piece of public health infrastructure. It's a barrier against disease.
This is just about comfort. It's about survival.
It's absolutely about survival. Another one is cooking fuel. If a household cooks with wood, charcoal, or animal dung, they are marked as deprived,
Because of the indoor air pollution.
which is one of the leading killers of women and children in the developing world. It's the equivalent of smoking several packs of cigarettes a day. So the MPI looks at all these things: nutrition, child mortality, years of schooling. And if your household is deprived in at least a third of these weighted indicators, you are officially classified as multidimensionally poor.
It just paints such a different picture. It's not an empty wallet. It's a life where every single interaction with your physical world, the air, the water, the ground, is a threat.
It is a constant grinding struggle. And to really hammer home the inequality this creates, Dr. Ali poses a thought experiment in the book that, honestly, it stopped me in my tracks.
I think I know the what you mean.
He asks you to imagine 100 children under the age of 5 who die today, somewhere in the world. Out of those 100 deaths, how many do you think happen in the developing world?
I remember reading this and trying to guess. And I guessed high. I thought, okay, it's bad, so maybe 80? Maybe 85.
A reasonable guess. The actual answer is 99.
99.
The ratio is 99 to 1. For every one child who dies in the developed world before their 5th birthday, 99 die in the developing world.
That's not a statistic, that's a verdict.
It's a verdict on the system.
Yeah.
That is not a random distribution of tragedy. That is an architecture of disparity. It means the single greatest determinant of whether you live to see your 5th birthday is not your genes or your parents' love. It's the longitude and latitude of your birth.
So how do we understand the architecture that holds this disparity in place? I know Dr. Ali used an analogy that I found incredibly helpful: the movie cast.
Yes, the cinema analogy. It's a brilliant and brutal way to frame the concept of agency or the lack of it.
So break it down. Society is a movie set.
Right. And on this set, you have your cast. First, you have the lead actors. The heroes, the villains, doesn't matter. These are the movers and shakers, the industrialists, the big landlords, the top politicians. They have agency. They drive the plot forward.
They have lines, they make choices.
Precisely. Then you have the supporting actors. This is the bureaucracy, civil society, the facilitators. They react to the lead actors. They help the plot move along. They have some influence.
Okay, and then there's the third group.
Then there are the background actors, the extras.
And in this movie, the poor people like Fatima, they are the background actors.
Exactly. Now, what's the job of an extra in a movie?
To descend for the way,
Okay.
to fill the space.
They stand on their designated mark. They wear the costume they're given. They have no lines. The plot happens to them, around them, but never because of them. Their fate, their entire existence within the scene, is decided by the choices of the lead and supporting actors.
They're scenery that breathes.
That's a perfect way to put it. They are in the frame, but they have zero agency to change the story. And that is, Dr. Ali argues, the lived reality of the multidimensionally poor.
It's such a bleak but
Yeah.
like a terribly accurate way of looking at it. So let's start digging into these players. Let's start with player number one, the poor themselves, the background actors.
And this is where we have to immediately start challenging some of our most deeply held assumptions. Because there's a very common tendency, especially for a Western observer or someone from a wealthier background, to look at the choices the poor make and just, well, to judge them.
To see them as irrational.
Irrational, uneducated, making bad decisions.
The classic one is the large family. I've heard this 1,000 times. Well, if they're so poor, why do they have 6, 7, 8 kids? Don't they understand? That just makes it harder to feed everyone.
Dr. Ali completely flips this argument on its head. He says we need to understand the heuristics of poverty, the mental shortcuts, the survival logic. He argues the poor are not irrational at all. In fact, they might be hyper-rational for the context they live in.
So having a big family is a rational choice. How?
Okay, so think about it from their perspective. In a wealthy, developed country, a child is, economically speaking, a liability for about 18 to 22 years. They cost a fortune in daycare, education, healthcare.
Sure.
In a poor, rural, agrarian setting, a child is an economic asset, and they are your social security system.
The social security system, explain that.
There's no 401k, there's no state pension, there are no nursing homes. The only thing standing between you and total destitution in your old age is your children. Your security is their willingness and ability to care for you. More children means more lines of support.
So it's diversifying your retirement portfolio.
In a way, yes. And it's not just about old age, it's about the here and now. In a farming community, a 6-year-old can watch the goats. A 10-year-old can help in the fields. More children equals more household labor, which equals more income and a higher chance of survival today.
And this creates a really twisted paradox when it comes to education, doesn't it? Because the well-meaning outsider, the NGO, comes in and says, the answer is education. Send your kids to school.
It's a huge paradox because for that poor family, sending a child to school is an enormous risk with a very uncertain payoff.
What's the risk?
Think about the calculus.
Yeah.
First, there's the immediate cost. If you send your son to school, you lose his labor in the fields today. That's a direct hit to the family's income.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the bigger, more existential risk is what happens if the education is successful. If he does well, gets a degree, what does he do? He leaves. He has to. The opportunities aren't in the village. He moves to Karachi or Lahore or Dubai to get a job.
And he breaks a social contract.
He breaks the Social Security contract. The bond is weakened. He might send some money home, maybe, but he's not there to physically care for you when you're old and sick. The system, the very structure of opportunity, incentivizes the family to keep the children uneducated and close to home.
That is just, it's mind-blowing. The rational choice is to limit your child's future to secure your own.
It's not ignorance. It's a brutal, logical calculation based on survival.
Yeah.
And until you can solve that underlying security problem, until that family has a different, more reliable safety net, just shouting, education is good, is completely pointless.
Wow. Okay, so that's the logic of the background actors.
Yeah.
Let's move to the stars of the show. Player 2, the rich, the status quo. And again, Dr. Ali avoids making them into cartoon villains. He introduces a character named Hadra, who is the wife of a wealthy landlord.
Yes, and this is so important. If we just dismiss the rich as evil, greedy people, we miss the entire dynamic. Hadra is not evil. She's a product of her system, and she's acting rationally within it.
She's a mother. She runs a big household. She's actually very charitable.
Yeah, very charitable in a specific way. She gives to the poor in her village. If someone is sick, she might pay the doctor's bill. If a family has no food, she'll send over a bag of rice. She does this in part because she believes it earns her religious merit a place in heaven.
Okay. There's always a but.
There is a huge but. Her charity is what we call patronage. She helps individuals with their immediate problems, but she has absolutely zero interest in changing the system that makes them poor in the first place.
Because she benefits from that system.
Massively. She has a driver, a cook, a cleaner, a gardener, all working for wages that are incredibly low. Her entire lifestyle of comfort and security is built on the foundation of a large, dependent, and cheap labor pool.
So if the poor suddenly became empowered, educated, and started demanding, a minimum wage.
Her whole world would collapse. Who would cook her food for $100 a month? Who would drive her car? So she is caught in this bizarre dynamic where she performs acts of personal kindness while actively, if subconsciously, upholding a structure of systemic cruelty.
It's a control mechanism disguised as benevolence.
That's the perfect phrase for it. The patronage system keeps the rich in control. They have the agency, they can bend the rules for themselves, get their cousin a government job, get a permit approved. But they use that agency to maintain the hierarchy, not dismantle it. They'll help Fatima with a single hospital bill, but they will fight tooth and nail against building a public hospital that would make Fatima independent of their charity.
Which brings us to the next group, the ones who are supposed to be the bridge. Player 3, civil society. This is the NGOs, the academics, the development experts. You'd think, okay, these are the people who are going to speak truth to power.
You would hope so. But this is, I think, the most scathing part of Dr. Ali's critique. He uses a term that I had to read twice. He calls it ventriloquism.
Ventriloquism, like a puppet on a knee.
It's exactly like that. He argues that a huge portion of the academic and NGO sector in the developing world are not speaking with their own voices. They aren't responding to the needs of their own communities.
They're the dummy.
They're the dummy, and the ventriloquist is the Western donor. The big foundations, the international aid agencies.
So they're just saying what the person with the money wants to hear.
They are mimicking the priorities, the buzzwords, the frameworks of the West, because that's where the grants come from. If the hot topic in Washington or London is gender-inclusive climate resilience, then suddenly every NGO in Pakistan is an expert on gender-inclusive climate resilience.
Even if the most pressing local problem is something totally different, like a lack of basic antibiotics.
Exactly. They chase the funding, and the funding dictates the agenda. So the local reality gets ignored in favor of the imported priority.
He gives 2 examples of this that are just so powerful. The first one is about breastfeeding. The Western mantra of breast is best.
Right, and let's be clear, breast milk is biologically the best food for a baby. That is a scientific fact. But a universal truth applied without context can become a dangerous dogma. In the West, for a healthy, well-nourished mother, promoting breastfeeding is unequivocally a good thing. But you take that same rigid message to a place like Matiari,
where the mother, Fatima, is herself malnourished.
She's malnourished, she's anemic, she's working 10 hours a day in the sun, she may not be physically capable of producing enough milk, or she simply cannot be with her baby all day because if she doesn't work, the family starves.
So what happens?
The local health experts, the academics, the NGOs, the ventriloquists, they just parrot the Western line. Ban infant formula. Breast is best. They hold seminars demonizing formula because that's the globally progressive stance funded by UNICEF or the WHO.
But they don't offer a viable alternative for the mother who physically cannot breastfeed.
None. They don't do the hard local research to say, okay, given our reality, what is a safe, affordable, and locally producible alternative for the infant who is literally starving to death? They don't do that.
Why not?
Because if they stood up in an international conference and said, actually, in our context, we need to explore safe formula options, they would be seen as backward. They'd risk their funding, their prestige, their seat at the global table. So they value their standing in the international community more than the life of the baby in their own village.
It's heartbreaking. And the second example, the one with the motorcycles, is just as revealing.
This one is so visual. If you've ever seen footage from a city like Karachi, you see motorcycles everywhere, and you see women riding on the back.
But not how we'd ride here. They're sitting side saddle, both legs on one side of the bike.
Right. Because of cultural norms, modesty, the type of clothes they wear, like a shalwar kameez or a sari, they can't straddle the seat.
And from a basic physics standpoint, that is incredibly dangerous.
It's a death trap. Your center of gravity is completely off. If the driver swerves or hits a pothole, you have no way to balance or catch yourself. You just fly off. Thousands of women are killed or maimed this way every year.
A massive daily public health crisis. So where's the research?
That's the question Dr. Ali asks. Where are the local engineering schools designing safer bikes for side saddle passengers? Where are the studies on side saddle ergonomics? Where are the helmet designs that work with a hijab?
They don't exist.
It's a complete void. And why? Because side saddle motorcycle safety is not a topic in the Western academic journals. It's not a research priority at MIT or Cambridge. So the local academics, the ventriloquists, they ignore it. They're busy writing papers on topics that will get them published internationally, not on the problems that are killing people right outside their window.
So we're just importing solutions that don't fit the local reality. We're ignoring the native plants to focus on the imported trees.
That is a fantastic metaphor, and we will definitely come back to that. But first, we have to look at the other big institutional players, the really heavy hitters. Player 3, the clergy, and player 4, the politicians.
Let's start with the clergy. In a country like Pakistan, religion isn't just a private faith. It's a parallel economy and a social structure.
It's enormous. You take a concept like zakat, the obligatory 2.5% wealth tax in Islam that goes to the poor. That's a massive informal welfare system. Then you have Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. The source estimates that the buying and selling of sacrificial animals in Pakistan is a $3 billion industry, with a B.
$3 billion in just a few days.
So the clergy oversees this huge redistribution of resources. They often provide the social safety net that the government fails to. They run schools, they provide counseling, a sense of community, of identity. This is all very powerful and, in many ways, very positive. But they also function as what political scientists call a veto player. They have the power to shut down progress if it clashes with their interpretation of religious doctrine.
The story of the milk bank. This one just broke my heart.
It is a perfect, tragic example of dogma colliding with science. So a modern hospital set up a human milk bank. The idea is simple and life-saving.
All over the world.
All over the world. Mothers with a surplus of breast milk can donate it. It gets pasteurized, screened, and stored safely. Then it's given to premature babies, orphans, or infants whose own mothers are too ill to produce milk. It's a medical miracle.
And the local clergy shut it down.
They did. They issued a fatwa, a religious ruling, against it. The reasoning was based on an interpretation of Islamic law that says if a child drinks a woman's milk, that child becomes a milk sibling to her biological children.
Right.
And under that law, milk siblings are forbidden from ever marrying each other. Because the milk bank would be pooling milk from many anonymous donors, you would never know who your milk mother was. Therefore, you could, decades later, unknowingly marry your milk sister.
So to prevent a hypothetical accidental marriage between two people 20 years from now,
they chose to let real babies, here and now, starve or die from malnutrition. Science clashed with dogma, and in that institutional power struggle, dogma won. The clergy vetoed life.
Unbelievable. And that brings us to the last local player, the politicians and the bureaucracy. Player 4. Dr. Ali's breakdown of their motivation is just so brutally simple.
It is. A politician has 3 goals, and 3 goals only. 1, get elected. 2, avoid bad press. 3, get good press.
And notice what's not on that list.
Create sustainable, long-term solutions to poverty is conspicuously absent. And to understand why, you have to understand the system of functional blackmail that operates in rural areas.
Functional blackmail.
In a rural district, the poor, the landless farmers, they don't vote based on policy or ideology. They vote as a block, and that block is controlled by the local landlord, the husband of Hadra from our earlier example.
He tells them who to vote for, and they do it.
Yes, because their survival depends on his goodwill. So if you're a politician who wants to win that district, who do you need to please?
Not the 1,000 poor farmers. You need to please the one landlord.
Exactly. And what does the landlord want? He wants to keep the status quo. He doesn't want the poor to be educated or empowered because that would threaten his supply of cheap labor. So the politician and the landlord make a deal. The landlord delivers the votes, and the politician makes sure no meaningful reform ever happens. The local bureaucrat, the police chief, the tax collector, they all align with the landlord to keep their jobs.
It's a perfect self-sustaining circle of stagnation.
It is. And reform is not just ignored, it's actively discouraged. Because empowering the poor fundamentally undermines the patronage network that keeps the entire elite class in power.
Okay, this feels incredibly hopeless. The poor are trapped, the rich benefit, the academics are compromised, the clergy vetoes progress, and the politicians are bought. But wait, here comes the cavalry. The international organizations, the UN, the World Bank, the big foundations. Player 5. Surely they can break this deadlock.
Ah, yes. The international community. Well, this leads us to what Dr. Ali identifies as the systemic failure of vertical aid. And to get this, we first have to understand the difference between 2 types of problems. There are complicated problems and there are complex problems.
I love this distinction. Please break it down.
A complicated problem is like performing brain surgery or building a rocket to go to Mars. It is incredibly difficult. It requires immense expertise, precision, and resources, but it follows a recipe.
An SOP, a standard operating procedure.
Exactly. If you follow the checklist, if you perform the steps in the right order with the right tools, you will get a predictable, repeatable result. One brain surgery is much like the next.
Okay, so that's complicated. What's complex?
A complex problem is like raising a child. There is no recipe. There is no manual. What works beautifully for one child might be disastrous for another. The outcome depends on a constantly shifting web of factors. The environment, their psychology, nutrition, their friends, their teachers, their mood that day. It's fluid and unpredictable.
And ending poverty is a complex problem.
ending poverty, reducing childhood stunting, fixing a failing education system. These are all profoundly complex problems, and the tragedy is that international organizations are structured to solve complicated problems.
They love complicated problems, don't they?
They are addicted to them. They love vaccine delivery. They love polio eradication. They love distributing bed nets. Why?
Because you can count it.
You can count it. We delivered 5 million vaccine vials. We distributed 10 million bed nets. It's measurable. It has a clear ROI. It fits perfectly on a PowerPoint slide for a board meeting in Geneva.
But when you apply a rigid, complicated vertical solution to a complex problem like public health, things start to break.
They break badly. Take the polio example. The global community has poured billions and billions of dollars into eradicating polio.
Which is a worthy goal. Polio is a terrible disease.
A terrible disease. No one disputes that. But the source argues that the way we did it, by creating this massive, powerful, vertical program focused only on polio, we ended up distorting and damaging the broader local health system.
How so?
We created a parallel system that paid better and had more resources. So all the best local doctors, the most competent nurses, the sharpest administrators, they all left their jobs at the underfunded public clinics to go work for the shiny, well-funded polio program.
So you're hollowing out the native system.
You're draining its talent.
Oh.
So while this massive machine is focused on finding the last case of polio, children are still dying in huge numbers from things like diarrhea, pneumonia, and malnutrition. The basic, boring, complex problems, because the local clinic that used to treat them has no staff left.
It's what Dr. Ali calls destructive aid.
Destructive aid. You might win the narrow battle against polio, but you lose the war for public health because you've left the local infrastructure in ruins. And when the polio money dries up and the international experts go home, the community is often worse off than when they started.
So if we recap, we have a system that is completely gridlocked. The poor are trapped by survival logic. The rich are trapped by patronage. The academics are ventriloquists. The clergy vetoes science. The politicians are blackmailed. And the international aid community is applying the wrong kind of solutions.
It is a grim, grim diagnosis. But it's only by being this brutally honest about the diagnosis that we can even begin to talk about a realistic cure.
Okay, so this is the pivot. This is section 6, the solution, the Public-Entrepreneurial Partnership, or PP model.
Right. So Dr. Ali looks at this landscape of failed players and asks the logical question, who is left? Who actually has the scale and the mandate to fix this? It can't be the NGOs, they're too small and donor dependent. It can't be the international orgs, they're temporary and apply the wrong models.
It has to be the state, the government.
It has to be the government. Only the state has the national reach, the constitutional authority, and the potential for permanence.
But hang on, we just spent 10 minutes explaining how the government is corrupt, inefficient, and trapped in patronage. How can it possibly be the solution?
Because we need to fundamentally change our definition of what the government is supposed to do. The critical mistake we've been making is thinking the government has to be the provider of all services.
Meaning the government has to be the one hiring the teachers, running the clinics, managing the staff.
Exactly. And the evidence is overwhelming. Governments, particularly in these contexts, are terrible at it. They are just not good at service delivery. There are no incentives. A bureaucrat gets their salary, whether the school he oversees is excellent or abysmal. There's no fire under them to perform.
But a private business owner?
A private business owner, an entrepreneur, has a bonfire under them. If they don't perform, if their customers aren't happy, they go out of business. They don't eat. Their survival is directly linked to their performance.
So the PP model is about combining the best of both worlds.
That's it. It's about marrying the scale of the state with the agility and accountability of the entrepreneur.
So in the PP framework, what is the government's job?
The government's job is to become the facilitator. They step back from delivering the service. Instead, their role is to create the ecosystem. They set the standards and the curriculum. They provide the funding, perhaps through a voucher or an insurance system. And they act as the regulator and quality control inspector.
But they don't run the school.
They don't run the school.
Yeah.
They pay a local education entrepreneur, a private school owner, a certain amount per student to actually deliver the education.
And if that school's students don't meet the learning benchmarks set by the government,
then that entrepreneur loses their contract, they lose their funding. Suddenly you have aligned the incentives. The entrepreneur is motivated by success to innovate, to make sure teachers show up, to get results. And the government's role is to ensure that the poor have access to this quality service by paying their fees and that the quality is maintained for everyone.
it bridges that no-do gap. We know how to teach a child, The government bureaucracy can't seem to do it, but an accountable entrepreneur can.
Precisely. And this gets back to your wonderful metaphor of the native plant versus the imported tree.
Right.
An imported tree is that big, flashy project funded by an international NGO. It looks great for the photos, but it requires constant external watering donor money. The second the funding cycle ends and the foreigners leave, the tree withers and dies.
Leaving nothing behind.
Nothing. A native plant, on the other hand, is that local entrepreneur, that woman from the community who starts a small private school or a clinic. Her solution is grown from the local soil. She understands the context, the culture, the needs. She's resilient. She's not going anywhere.
So the government's job isn't to plant more imported trees. It's to be the gardener for the native plants, to make sure they have enough water and sunlight.
That is a perfect, beautiful summary of the entire model. The state's role is to create the conditions where 1,000 of these native solutions can bloom. It's about admitting you can't force prosperity from the top down. You have to unleash the agency and ingenuity that already exists at the grassroots level.
And the source material points to the creation of Dubai as a sort of macro example of this.
In a way, yes. The rulers of Dubai didn't decide to have the government go into the business of baking every loaf of bread or running every hotel. They had a vision, and then they created a world-class ecosystem laws, infrastructure, security that facilitated private enterprise to come in and build the city. They were the ultimate facilitators.
So the goal for a country like Pakistan is to do the same, but for social services. Facilitate local entrepreneurs to solve childhood stunting. Facilitate local innovators to solve the literacy crisis.
Exactly. Because the talent is already there, the entrepreneurial spirit is there. The problem isn't a lack of smart people. The problem is a system that actively blocks them, that smothers them. The PEP model is about clearing away that blockage.
And if we bring it all the way back to Fatima, if a model like this had existed in Montiari,
you can imagine a different outcome. Maybe there wouldn't have been a dysfunctional, empty government facility. Maybe there would have been a private 24/7 clinic run by a doctor entrepreneur, funded by a government-backed insurance scheme. A clinic that had the right equipment and the right staff because its survival as a business depended on providing a quality service.
she didn't need a handout. She needed a functioning system.
She needed a market for services that actually served her.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground, from the personal tragedy of Fatima on that road to Hyderabad, through the deep paralysis of all the major players in the system, to the well-intentioned failures of international aid, and finally to this new blueprint for change.
And if there's one core takeaway, for me, it's that good intentions and charity are not enough. They can even be harmful. What's needed is deep structural change. It's this fundamental shift in the role of the state from being a clumsy, inefficient provider to a smart, nimble facilitator.
It's a call to action, really, that goes beyond just governments. It's about how all of us think about problem solving.
It is. And maybe that's the final provocative thought to leave our listeners with. We've spent this whole time talking about the developing world, but this distinction between complicated and complex problems, it applies everywhere.
In our own lives, our own companies.
Absolutely. So the question for you to mull over is this. In your own professional life, in your organization, what kind of problems are you focused on solving? Are you really tackling the complex ones, the messy, ambiguous human problems that truly matter? Or are you just looking for the complicated ones because they have a clear recipe, they're safe, and they look good on the quarterly report? To use your metaphor one last time, are you trying to cultivate a resilient native plant that will thrive long after you're gone? Or are you just planting a plastic tree to get a round of applause?
That is definitely going to keep me up tonight.
Okay.
Are we planting plastic trees? Wow. Thank you. This has completely changed how I think about not just poverty, but progress itself.
My pleasure. It's a vital conversation.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.